these concrete steps to create a de facto solidarity. That, frankly, is the single market. That's what it's all about. And next year is 2012. 20 years before that, if my arithmetic is right, was roughly speaking 1992. And many of you in the room will remember the 1992 programme, Lord Cofield's action plan to create the single market. 300 measures to create the single market, 300 and more actually. And so 20th anniversary, unsurprisingly, there's a dusting off of the whole programme and a look at what should be done. And here we have the Single Market Act is now being discussed all around Brussels anyway. And there are 50 proposals, not 300 this time, 50, and actually they will probably go for a dozen priority issues. And so it is that recognition that the single market has opened up, and we have always been very keen on that as a country. Mrs. Thatcher, her heyday, people may say more about this, was very keen to promote the single market, the free movement of people, goods, capital and services. Got those in the wrong order, but that's the central point. And for the financial market, out of this 50, there are lots of detailed points. I won't go through them. So the single market has been achieved, and if it were disachieved, that would be a huge blow to Europe, without a shadow of doubt. And that's why people like President Sarkozy talk about the end of Europe if this happens. Now, there were, and in the book I've gone through various examples of the single market in action. I'm going to choose two specific ones and talk a little bit about those. First of all, SEPA. And you probably don't know what SEPA is. It's the Single Euro Payments Area. In my view, this is a revolutionary step. And I've said this to the chap who runs the, he's a very dour Dutchman, when I described him to himself as being a revolutionary, because he runs the committee which organises all this, he was absolutely astounded. And when he thought about it, he agreed. Because what SEPA does is make a reality of being able to make a payment in euro. You've got the single currency, the euro, you've got the notes and coins. But 3 years ago, try making a payment across the border, waste of time. Now, you can sit at your computer and off you go, you have made a payment on exactly the same speed, cost and safety as if you were making a payment internally in your own country. So that opens the way to actually have citizens doing cross-border transactions as if they were at home, doing it inside. But there is, so that is really making the single market work, or giving it the opportunity of citizens who want to use the freedoms to use them on their own home. There is another element. And I was on the committee of that designed the changeover to the euro many years ago, which makes it slightly strange as a Brit, even at that stage. But I was there, and I was very pleased about it. And one of the things the committee was absolutely committed to, and completely convinced had to be done, was to change over the notes and coins, and have just one single set, to make quite sure that it was irreversible. And the reason it's irreversible now is very simple. If you've got a few euros, a few 100,000 euros perhaps, sitting in Greece, and you begin to fear, you've heard from your cousin in the ministry that they're beginning to print banknotes, new drachma banknotes, you know what's going to happen. One day there's going to be an announcement and the value of your euros will be converted to drachma at about a 20 or 30% discount, or some large number. But if you go home, sit on your terminal and do an immediate transfer, settlement in 2 days' time to a bank in Frankfurt, you're safe. Your money is protected. No cost, it's a free option. But if you do that, the Greek bank from which you have just taken the deposit will have a run on it, the like of which we have not seen before. And within a week, or maybe it's a fortnight, they will be completely bust. And therefore the Greeks will have to nationalise all their banks. And so they can't think about leaving. So in practical terms, you cannot leave the euro without having dramatic consequences for your system. So SEPA has made that, given the capacity to deal cross-border and trade as an individual, as a company. It has also created a dramatic people power, which is all in vogue at the moment, people power revolution. Another example I'm going to cite is accounting standards, which I know many people think is pretty dull, and I have to admit there are occasions when I'm reading some of these things and I find it difficult to keep my eyes open, but they are very important. If you're going to have a single capital market, a single financial system, which is the goal, you've got to know what you're buying. And the way you know is by looking at what the accountants tell you is the value of the company or the asset, etc. So you have to have a common and understood and agreed standard of what is the value of the shares you're about to buy, what are the assets the company holds, etc. It was completely obvious at the beginning that the Germans weren't going to accept French and the Brits weren't going to accept German standards, etc. So the EU hit upon the idea of let's use these ones called international accounting standards. They're not bad, need a bit of sharpening up perhaps, but in 2001 or 2 the EU agreed by regulation these would be the standards applied for all listed companies, therefore vast majority of business, and would be applied forthwith. 27 states started doing it. Now there are over 100 states around the world who use IFRS. There's at least another 20 who are thinking about it, and even I was saying the other day, most of Africa is now talking about adopting these standards. The really interesting thing is I listened in Brussels last week to Commissioner Barnier speaking about this, and the Americans have their own accounting standards, and of course America is a hydropower and therefore doesn't necessarily want to adopt Europe's accounting standards, even if they're called global. The comment that Barnier made is if the Americans do not decide that they will adopt IFRS, the global standard, or permit their companies to adopt it, then we, Europe, will have to do something about it. I assumed that he probably meant we would leave, take our toys away and do something else. I talked afterwards to the chap from the US Treasury who was there. He said, no, completely wrong. They are going to throw us out. The Europeans would throw the Americans out of the group which creates these standards which apply to 110 or 20 countries. And the Americans would be out. And the Americans have spotted this and are very concerned. So we have what is an integral part of the single market, absolutely essential part of the single market to begin with, has turned into a mechanism for the EU to project its soft economic power globally. And there are other examples, and I use some in the book. I just use those 2 examples. So if we had a situation where we gave up the single market, Europe, in the form of France and Germany, would revert to being small countries in the global system, rather than being representatives of 500 million, and the people who are setting the standards for insurance, mutual funds, accounting standards, etc., etc. So this is you can understand why their national pride is now built into this. But it's more, of course. If the single market were fragmented by the currency depreciating, if Germany, people talk about Germany leaving, the fact is they can't, for the reasons I've elaborated in my treaty, but that doesn't worry Eurosceptics at all. But if Germany did leave, what would happen? The Deutschmark, new Deutschmark, would shoot up. And so all the people who suddenly found, or the Germans who suddenly found that Italian milk now 20% cheaper, this is what happened in 1992 when the ERM crisis happened. The Germans were on the verge of putting on border controls to stop Italian milk coming in and taking the business of Bavarian dairy farmers because the currencies had moved. And this would happen again. So the idea that the single market would survive for very long, with the euro breaking up and large numbers of currencies happening, new currencies happening, I just don't believe it for a moment. And under those circumstances, we'd be back amidst great cries of bitterness and treachery and all the rest of it. We'd be back to a Europe that we knew a few years ago, a decade or 2 ago, and it wasn't a very happy place. So that is why the countries of the Eurozone are determined, in my view, to protect the single market. And that is something which we do not, in this country, take nearly sufficient account of. There's a very good reason why they make these statements. They will do whatever is necessary.